Afternoon, wherever you are in our universe. Welcome to another episode of Healing in Ways You Never Thought Possible with your host, myself, Dr. Dolores Fazzino. Today, as we continue with our Miraculous Healing series, we're going to talk about those mystery illnesses that people seem to have, that they go to their doctor, they run a battery test, and even though you're very symptomatic, they can't find anything wrong with you. We're talking about chronic fatigue. We're talking about fibromyalgia. We're talking about those things that are kind of not very, they're nebulous and they can't be really tangibly diagnosed. And today I have a very special guest who has lived through this, and she actually does some amazing work with people to help them navigate through that. And she's going to share her miraculous healing story. And her name is Elizabeth Morse. And let me just read a little bit about her for you. She's the founder of the Right Brain University. Elizabeth is an author and public speaker, as well as a gifted spiritual healer utilizing acupressure-based techniques, educational kinesiology, and specialized kinesiologies to maximally execute function and reset stress so the body and mind can operate in harmony. She's a Touch for Health instructor, a brain gym instructor, and a pain harmonic healing instructor. Lots of credentials here. She specializes in helping people who are resistant to the idea of alternative healing, as she once was herself. Many of us are skeptics, but you know what? You don't know it until you try it to see if something's different. So be open. She also loves working with test anxiety sufferers and to help them become great test takers. She's helped people pass the bar and get amazing scores on the SAT and ACT. So I would love to introduce you to my special guest today, Elizabeth Morse. Hey, Elizabeth, how's it going?
Hi, Dolores. I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're so very welcome.
I hope you're doing well too.
I am. Thank you very much. So, it's an interesting thing because me being in Western medicine for so many years, many people have come in with these, we call them mystery illnesses, where it's like, you are experiencing certain things, but it's like there's like this big wall or disconnect between what Western medicine has to offer and what they actually are listening to. And, I would love for you to share your experience with our audience today. So just tell us more about your story.
Oh, sure. Well, I grew up in a military household and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was born with a whopping case of complex PTSD. And that just kind of kept going on and on because, of course, we repeat patterns of what we're familiar with. So I ended up in my first marriage being married to somebody that recreated that stress of my childhood. And by the time I was in my late 30s, early 40s, I was such a stressed out person that I was manifesting all sorts of illness symptoms. And it took about 10 years to get diagnosed. So I noticed probably mid 30s that I was having these issues, and I went to one doctor after the other, and no answer, no answer, no answer for 10 years. So I had symptoms of what eventually became chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, as well as IBS, Irritable Bowel Syndrome. I went to a neurologist. I went to my regular GP, test after test again, eventually gastroenterologist once it was diagnosed. And, what the neurologist kept saying was, hinting at was that it was all in my head.
Yep, that's what they do sometimes.
Yep. So, and then once a diagnosis was made, and they sent me on to a rheumatologist to help with the fibromyalgia symptoms, and to the gastroenterologist, I realized that what they were talking about was just trying to band-aid it and manage pain. And I don't know about you, but if you had an open sore on your body, you wouldn't just put a Band-Aid over it. You would probably clean it, right? And you would figure out what you kept doing over and over that was making that wound appear, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
just because it was on the inside of my body, it didn't make sense that I would just take a pill that had horrible symptoms, including one of them that they wanted to put me on had symptoms of growing tumors.
Yikes.
And one of my friend's husband was on that drug and he ended up developing a tumor from it that he ended up dying from. It
Jeez.
became cancerous and he ended up dying from it. So I knew I didn't want to just mess around with that kind of thing. And once I realized that Western medicine was not going to get me the answers that I needed, I mean, God bless everybody whose answer lies in a pill. You are the luckiest humans on the planet. But for those of us who can't take them, who have maybe a genetic issue with being able to process the components of the chemicals make it hard for some of us to be processed. And so the side effects are really toxic for some of us. And that was the truth for me, that I
Mm.
just couldn't take these meds without having horrible side effects. So I knew I needed to do something else because I wasn't just willing to suffer. And I ended up as a complete skeptic. I didn't believe in anything alternative. When my mother started doing yoga when I was a teenager, I was humiliated that, I was the only kid in the school whose mother was doing yoga and gazing at her navel. And, now I spend 3 times a week doing hot yoga. So I'm getting paid back in spades. uh,
Yeah. Well,
and
it's true. It's just like sometimes, we uh, have a tendency to, judge something before we even give it a chance to experience it, because it's all in the experience and witnessing it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we're wired to try to fit in, to try to conform as teenagers specifically, and I think for a lot of us it doesn't end. I was a huge people pleaser, and basically what happens, I think women in general tend to be raised to take care of others before we take care of ourselves, and ultimately what ends up happening for some people, if you're in a stressful environment, you get to a point where you can't take it anymore. And you have a choice of either watching yourself slide into illness, as I was doing, um, and you can do something about it. It's your choice. You have a choice. You can choose to become well. It does take some work, but I felt like I deserved a chance to live the rest of my life. I had 10-year-old boys and I didn't want to leave them behind. I did feel like I was dying from what was going on. The stress was just over the top. I couldn't cope with it anymore. So I had to act.
No, and great insight as well. And so many of us, your situation is very similar to a lot of people's. It's like it's a pattern that, and you're absolutely spot on. It's like, I think our generation was raised in a society where, you did X, Y, and Z so you could be A, B, and C. And it
Yeah.
was like programming you into something that you were not. And it was almost as if, our physical body was rebelling because it knew at a deeper level that this was not our truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, whatever we call our higher power, I believe we're here to be in service to that and not so much what the ego wants. And I certainly learned the hard way that I could cling to my ideas of how my life was going to go, which was, I was a very fearful person, as you can imagine, with all of the complex PTSD. And I couldn't imagine making it on my own. I couldn't imagine the horror of, being having my children be from a broken home. And so I clung to that marriage
Mhm.
with every last little bit that I could possibly do, until I realized that it wasn't possible to have it work out. And ultimately, I feel that um, the choice that I made, I could see, was to head back into health, and ultimately that I and other people who are going through these stresses deserve to be able to do that. It's allowing things to happen in order to be of service to whatever you call that higher power, whatever you call the um, what some people would call the spiritual side of things, what others would call would fit into religion, probably. There's an aspect of the brain that in Western medicine they've seen that there's an aspect to the brain that is responding to that spiritual side of things. It's a part that has to develop in order to be healthy, and you can call it what you want. I work with atheists, so it's possible to, you don't have to believe anything to have alternative medicine work, is the bottom line.
True.
That I'm saying.
Yeah. No, and thank you for sharing your story, because I think it is so many people are in similar situations, and sometimes it's like when you're in it, it's not, something's off, but you are kind of grasping for straws. And a lot of times we look so much on the external for the answers, and sometimes we have to realize you need to come within and give yourself permission to listen to that wisdom that we carry within ourselves. And for you, it's how wise you were and how brave you were and courageous to step into that, to realize that there was something more for yourself. That's huge.
Thanks. I wish I could say that I started off brave. I really didn't. What I ended up doing was, at the same time that all of this was going on, of course, the synchronicities, right? When you start to follow a spiritual path, I had started writing a novel because I was sick. I thought, well, I can't handle a regular job. I'll start writing a novel, and it'll be a great American novel, and that's how I'll contribute to the family fortune. So I started writing this novel. It was a Southern historical fiction novel, and I realized that I did need to be brave. And so I started writing about my great great Aunt Kitty, who was the only person that I knew that I was related to biologically who was brave and a woman combined. Other families had brave women. It didn't seem to run in my family at all. And so I borrowed some of her courage by sort of putting myself in her head and writing about her. And then that I just again got lucky where I found this alternative healing work that allowed me to learn a drop at a time the feelings that my body needed me to learn in order to start healing. I was so emotionally avoidant. I was resisting all feelings. And ultimately, it means that you can't feel joy any more than you can feel anger, for example. And once I realized that I could just feel at a drop at a time, and it didn't mean that I was going to get taken out for a week by depression or anxiety or, getting upset by an event in my life, that's when I started to be able to become a little bit more brave and just realize that we're all riding the ocean, basically. We're riding like surfers, we're riding these waves that come, and sometimes the waves are energy and sometimes the waves are feelings, and we're that's the goal, to get to learn these things that happen.
Well, and I believe too, it's like once you really start going in that direction, it's hard to, you can't turn back to not going there, because it's like you're starting to become one with the flow of who you are.
Yeah.
And it's like you're saying, riding the waves, and sometimes there's going to be a big wave and sometimes there's small ones. I talk about grief a lot because, sometimes when you lose somebody that you love, and you're going through your process, and you could have months where you're perfectly fine, and then out of the blue, years later, there's this, it's like this big wave comes over you, and you're like, oh my God, and you're just bawling like a baby. And the thing is, it's like, that's just the way emotions are. Grief is just one example, and it just ebbs and flows, and just being with it and allowing yourself to experience that is some of the richness of having a human experience here on earth, I believe.
Yeah,
But yet,
absolutely.
but yet, our society says, oh, no, 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 you can't feel, no feeling. Put it in a box, put it on a
Yep.
shelf
Yeah.
or whatever, but it's just like, it's not a good thing. And, absolutely, when you don't feel your emotions, you start to numb yourself out. And it takes a while for that to, you start to feel comfortable being with your emotions. So it's baby steps. It's about giving yourself permission to go there too.
Absolutely. Well, and this culture just in general is terrified of feelings, I
Oh my
find.
God. Absolutely.
I don't feel like I was alone,
Not at all.
we're we're encouraged to stuff them because they can be felt by other people. I believe on a subconscious basis, we're completely capable of picking up what other people are feeling, both on the individual level and as a group,
Yeah.
both in the country and throughout the world. Absolutely. And so, you know, it's very inconvenient if you're going to work and there's a meeting and you're broadcasting what it is that you're feeling. It could have a negative impact on your survival, in that longevity in your job, right? So
True.
that's the reason why we're taught, as well as just in the home life. How many kids were allowed to be the angry kid? If you're lucky, there was one person lucky. There was one person in the family who got to be the express all of the emotions, and the others were the ones that kind of had to put a lid on it. And often it was just every kid had to put a lid on it,
True.
and
Very
only the
true.
parents got to express it. So it's all in there. We're just swimming in this neurochemical soup. And as you know,
Yeah.
neurochemicals, the molecules of emotion are inflammatory, and inflammation can lead to disease.
And over time. Absolutely. And so Elizabeth, the work that you're doing now, why don't you share with the audience what exactly you're doing and stuff like that? And I have Elizabeth's contact information on the screen here too as well. So share some more about that.
Well, I help people who want to rewire their brain. Uh, so basically, what I found in my own case is that the subconscious is very intelligent. Our subconscious is really the majority of our brain, is our subconscious and unconscious. It's very intelligent. It wants to rewire and to have success, but it can't agree until it gets its needs met. And its needs are met by feeling. So if you have a goal, what's happening is all of our past experiences are bracing themselves. So past events lead to what we would call inner children. The inner child that we have is a compilation of each individual experience that was traumatic for us, and it doesn't take much to traumatize a child. So if you think of those inner children within us, that of all the events that were negative that we couldn't understand emotionally, those are all waiting to learn. And they're also waiting to stop us, to keep us safe.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually heroic. They're trying to save our lives. They feel like they have more information than we have as the conscious mind. So I help people to be able to get in touch with their inner children and find out what it is that they need to learn in a session. We go through a layer and figure out those key emotions that will allow the goal of perhaps success in business at a level they haven't been able to experience before, or passing a test that they haven't been able to pass before. So I love what I do because I get to right wrongs. Like, people are born with a hemisphere that's dominant. And if you happen to be a right hemisphere dominant person, you're going to have a harder time both scholastically, taking tests, and in the business world. because you're going to have these sort of more emotional impediments when you get to a certain success level. So you basically say, I help right brainers take their proper spot in the world.
Cool. Very good. Love that explanation. And I believe that your work is so needed, especially for many people who are the empaths, intuitives, and highly sensitive people,
Yeah.
to be able to, segue in and to, thrive instead of survive in their world. So I think that's huge. And so thank you so much for coming on board today. I appreciate you sharing your story. You definitely, the issues that you are sharing and stuff, it's more normal. It's more of the norm in society than not, but it's like people don't talk about that. And I know, just circling back, the mystery illnesses, I think a lot of times if there's something going on and it can't be diagnosable in Western medicine, there's still more something going on, and you need to take a deeper dive into as to why this is so.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people are surprised when illnesses come up because we are also wired to try to not show if we have a weakness. And basically the stress of our childhoods it's bubbling under the surface all the time. It's
Absolutely.
preventing us from restocking the cupboards of all of the nutrients that we need in order to replenish our body. And we are at the mercy of whatever our genetic weak link is once we let that stress build up over time to the point where we just don't have anything left in the cupboards to repair ourselves. So it's
True.
really, everybody can benefit from doing this kind of work. There's a lot of people out there who do really great energy work, and I wish that I had discovered it sooner so I didn't skate so close to the edge of the rink, onto the thin ice.
But you know what? You have to realize too that everybody, you're on your journey for whatever reason, you're gaining the wisdom. So who you are in this moment is a culmination of everything you've experienced, the good, bad, the ugly, as I call it, but it's just like it makes you who you are, and you're able to move forward and help and assist many people. So
Yeah.
thank you so very much for your work. Do you have any parting words for our audience as we kind of circle and close?
Oh, actually, I did want to mention that if you do go to my website,
Mm-hmm.
that I am starting a program of energy healing that's free. It's just donation based if anybody wants to donate, for both for cancer survivors and for people who have military service or first responders who have chronic PTSD or complex PTSD. I will be running starting in September for both of these groups, and it'll be a Wednesday morning. I believe it's going to be 10 o'clock for the cancer survivors and 11 o'clock for the military and first responders. So I'd
Perfect.
love to have you join me. Please spread the word.
Okay. So, and I have Elizabeth's contact information. If you'd like to reach out to her, it's Elizabeth@rightbrainuniversity.com. And her website is www.rightbrainuniversity.com. So once again, thank you, Elizabeth. I thank you for sharing your story and your journey. It's been incredible. And, carry on and continue to help the rest. And so as we close our segment here, if you like what you hear, I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Dr. If you have one of those minds where you are not living in the present moment, you're either in your mind thinking about yesterday, worrying about tomorrow, I have something for you. It's a free meditation to allow you to ground in the present moment. And you could get that at drdoloresfazzino.com/free-video. So once again, thank you, Elizabeth, for being part of our show today. And I'm just going to sign off to our audience, and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing in Ways You Never Thought Possible. Bye now.